We're back on Radio Entrepreneurs. My name again is Jeffrey Davis. I'm the host, also during the day of Mage, LLC. And our guest today is Peter Myerson from Cohn, Rasnick, Myerson, and Plout. Welcome back, Peter.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here, as it always is.
Thank you. And you have a story for us today, don't you?
I do, actually, and you may have already heard it, but there are some really interesting takeaways. There's a case in Massachusetts called Beninati versus Borghi, which got decided in July, and a lot of commentators are talking about it, and I'm kind of going to go through the facts very quickly, but there's some takeaways that people haven't commented on, which I think are really important for people who are going into business in partnership with other people from a variety of points of view. So this is it kind of sounds a little bit like a related case to Demoulas, which I know you've been talking on the radio about.
Right.
You know, and fiduciary duties of owners and partners in companies. But let me give you a few facts, because they're kind of interesting, and I've kind of gotten juiced up over this case. Tony and Stephen, and I'm just going to use their first names, although they are the Borghi and the Beninati, went into business in the late 90s. And what they did was they formed a health club called, what is it called? It's called Workout World. So, wow. And they didn't have a license. There's actually a licensor in New York that has a license for the name. And when they went into business and formed the first club, they formed an LLC, which, as you know, is really, in effect, a partnership. And they had an operating agreement. They had two smaller partners, one of whom was a guy named Mazzada, and he apparently was the guy that did the build-out. And they had another guy involved who was the lawyer, and the four of them had the ownership interests, the membership interests. And, you know, the club worked well. They, about a year or two later, they started another club. And by the time 2004 comes around, they have, you know, a dozen clubs. And they're having a good old time, and they go and talk to their accountant. And the way they set these up is really a very clever way. Each separate club is a separate LLC. So you've got all these different entities. So they go and talk to their accountant, and their accountant says, well, you know, you guys ought to have some operating agreements. And they put in place some operating agreements that contain non-competition agreements. So none of the members are allowed to do business within 50 miles of an existing WOW club. And they have by this time already gotten a license from the guy in New York who has the ownership, you know, of WOW. And unfortunately in 2005, Tony dies. Okay. Now, there's no cross-buyout agreement, which is like the first thing that somebody should be thinking about when you have a successful business like this.